Hello, this is Sri Chellappa again, back with the People Strategy Leaders podcast. And I am joined today with actually a good friend of mine, Prithvi, who we both worked together as executives in a previous life. So Prithvi obviously has a lot of experience leading companies, leading teams, leading organizations. And I am really excited to have him. As a way of the background, Prithvi is the founder and CEO of SmartKarrot, and is a business leader with varied experience in creating successful businesses and cross-functional teams. He has spent over 25 years in varied roles, believes in employee success, goes hand in hand with customer success. Prithvi's experience spans growing sales, account management, marketing, and product teams from grounds up. His experience in growing his last organization, which is where we work together, to a $110 million revenue entity gives him enormous insights into various stages of growth and the associated team management. So obviously, the growth we had in a previous organization, Emits, where we worked together, it went through all stages, from a startup to a late stage startup to a very successful company. So what were some of the welcome to the call, Prithvi. But the first question I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the learnings you had in that process in team building?
Hey, Sri, first of all, thanks for having me, and congratulations to you as well as the entire Engagely team as well for the enormous growth you are seeing and success. I'm very glad to be here. To your point, it was quite a journey growing, and as you are aware, we have gone through our ups and downs, in business cycle as well as we have handled teams. So fair amount of learning, Sri. I think it spans across 3-4 broad areas I would mention. Early part of my career, and as I went through business school, and even my early part of my Emits journey, I was very skeptical of the word culture, and I think a lot of people are. And across that journey, and now as I run my own organization, I'm much more appreciative of, and respectful of the difficulty it is to create a good culture in your organization. So, and even within, a small team. So that would be number one, and maybe we could speak about that a little later. And then obviously a ton of learning in hiring people. A ton of learning in how do you incentivize, motivate people, how do you keep being consistent as you drive certain revenue metrics or performance goals across teams. Also a good amount of learning in how to let people go. So I think all that is part of team building, and I would say those top 3 would be primary areas which we have gained maximum amount of exposure.
Yeah, so let's talk about the hiring and finding the right talent and having the right talent stay with you first. Sure. When you are a brand that not many people necessarily know about as a startup or even as a late stage and successful startup, you're competing with the likes of Microsoft and Accenture and the likes of those, right, for the talent. Sure. And then and you're not necessarily paying them top of the salary range. Yep. That the market has. So what are some of the things that you saw successful in your role previously, but also here, to make sure that you get the right talent and you continue to retain them and motivate them?
Yeah, no, excellent question. I think for you obviously want to attract performers and people who are above average and are likely to be above average in performance when you're looking out to build a team. Now, for that sort of profile, salary and compensation is one aspect of it. But an equally important aspect is recognition, as well as the opportunity to grow and the opportunity to be, performing freely. That, I think, potentially is a big differentiator which a lot of organizations don't leverage, and which we are trying to. As we attract talents, we are saying, hey, here is a culture, and we go back to that initial learning, that we have a culture of allowing performers to thrive. They are more free. They have the independence to speak their mind, do their stuff, without being constrained by a lot of stuff which larger organizations potentially can't avoid. And that, I think, is an important element of not only attracting them in the first place, but to your point, also of retaining them. So they'll come in because of that sort of hope, but they will remain if you are consistent in driving that behavior.
Yeah. So to summarize, culture is an important ingredient where they feel that they have a place to speak up their mind, and are empowered to take decisions and do the things that they feel is right to move the company forward, move the organization, their goals forward. It's a great point. A lot of organizations have a lot of bureaucracy, have a lot of approval process and things like that that they need to do, obviously for a good reason. But obviously that's something that as a startup you can be a little bit more flexible with, and and that's where you attract the people who are go-getters in many ways as well. So as we talk about that, what do you look for people when you're hiring them to be successful in your culture that you're building and the teams that you're building?
Yeah, so what I've learned to do, Sri, over the years is sort of, instead of getting immediately into the JD and starting off the interview process, probably step back a little bit and look at, even within the team, what is it that you want to drive? I mean, it's easy to say, I want to drive, for example, if you take a sales team, we are saying, just revenue. That's not good enough. You have to also think through is it revenue and building pipeline? Is it closure ratios you want to be higher, so on and so forth. So you define the outcome expected of the team. You also define what is the broad behavioral parameters you are willing and accepting the team to be able to drive. Then you go and try and find fitment from the market to fit into that scheme of thing. It is not necessarily, but it is avoidable to make a generic hire and then try to retrofit back into your culture, processes, and outcomes. So that's one aspect. And once you have those line of sight for different roles and different teams, as well as a broad organizational fitment, then you go and look for those specifics. You will, of course, look for the standard skill sets for that role. But then, the additional layers come in with regards to really fitment to your scheme of things, where you are, what stage of organization are you. For us, we need people who are, more, let's go and do it today, then follow process, because we are in that phase of growth currently. But at a later stage, we may want to look at somebody more, aligned more to process than to day-to-day hustle. Just to give you an example.
That makes sense. Somebody who was really good in sales at, let's say, IBM may not be as good of a salesperson in a startup like SmartKarrot or Engagely. Because they are in different stages of their evolution, and the companies are in different stages of evolution. This reminds me of this really good book that I read a few months ago, which actually was written like 15, 20 years ago. It's called Who. Mm-hmm. And Who basically says the biggest problems that executive faces is who to hire, who to fit in that role. That is pretty much the only biggest problem that they have. And it talks about exactly what you are talking about here, Prithvi, which is focusing on the outcomes that you're looking for in that role, focusing on what type of goals and results you want to see, and then working backwards from that to really identify the type of person you want to hire into that role, or whether it's an internal hire, or whether you're promoting somebody, or whether you're hiring from external in the market as well. And I think that goes to a great idea, right? I mean, it's not necessarily a great idea, but what I mean to say is that's a great point, because organizations typically will say, hey, this person has 10 years of experience in selling to enterprises. Yeah, but you were selling to enterprises when you were working for a big Fortune 100 brand, but selling to enterprises when you are working for a SmartKarrot or an Engagely or any other, Series A or pre-Series A startup, completely different ballgame. They have to act differently. They have to work differently. They have to have a different type of motivation and style, which obviously makes a huge difference. So obviously that's, hiring the right talent and how to go about that. You made a great point there. So let's talk about, once they are in the team, what makes that person or the people in your team successful? What are some of the 2 or 3 things that you do to ensure that the team is working towards its, stated objectives?
Yeah, it's a very valid question, Sri. So quite a few things, and again, learned the hard way by making mistakes. So one thing I have always been reasonably good at across my career, handling teams and scaling them, has been to be consistent in how you evaluate the team members. Consistent and fair. That came naturally to me, and that worked for me. And I think I continue to believe in that and do that now by design. Earlier, it probably used to happen by default. So being consistent in your communication, being consistent in what goals you have set, and being fair in treating all team members.
Right.
It's not about being equal. You don't treat everyone equally. You have to treat performers differently than you treat non-performers. But the thing is, are you doing it fairly, and is it transparent enough and fair enough? I think those three, and this latter one is easier said than done, and you have to put a discipline to be able to do that. I think goes a long way in people, aligning to the organization, aligning to the leader, and aligning to the organizational outcomes, more importantly.
Yeah, and you make a great point. One of them that really resonates with me is being consistent in your goals and your objectives. I would add the word clarity as well.
Yep.
The important thing that most people want is clarity of expectations, clarity of your goals, and the why behind those goals. So they know why they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
And when I see managers and leaders in my past life, and sometimes even now in other organizations, where they change what they want every 2 weeks because they heard something from somebody at a bar or read an article somewhere, or they just felt it differently another day. And if you start changing your goals and expectations, that's where the people get confused and they get demotivated, more importantly. So, having consistency is great. And being fair is absolutely critical. So, I really appreciate, that approach there.
Yeah, just to
awesome.
Underline one, if I may, just to underline what you said, one point, I think you made a very, very important point of clarification of the why. I mean, look, as a startup and the phase we are at right now, we do change tracks. I mean, it's not as if we don't, because we need to. At times, we understand we are going down the wrong path. We need to change and change fast. It is okay to change as long as you clarify and explain to the team why you are doing it. I think people understand, align to it. So you made a very good point that, and we do it fairly often, or we are forcing ourselves to be diligent in doing that. Every time you change track or make a change to the outcome the team is expected to align to, please spend some time explaining the rationale behind why.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you look at the leadership and as you continue to build your team, I'm sure you're at least admire a few leaders out there. So my question I always ask every guest is, maybe name a leader that you feel you really admire and somebody you like to emulate or at least take some lessons from.
Yeah, and so right off the cuff, what is top of mind for me are, I've been an avid sports person myself, Sri as well, and I take a lot of learnings from what you see in team sports to corporate life. And in that context, coming from my Indian heritage and background and following cricket as actively as I have, one of the significant learnings I've taken even into corporate life is from what most people in India would know as Mahendra Singh Dhoni. Right from grounds up to whatever we have discussed right now on this call, I think he's a good example of backing the right people, setting the right culture, putting the team accordingly, letting go of even seniors because they didn't fit that culture anymore or didn't fit the alignment to the team principles anymore, clarifying reasons of why you should be doing what you should be doing. So I'm a great admirer of Mahendra Singh Dhoni.
Yeah. No, he's absolutely an amazing captain, and I think I have a lot of respect for him. But I also the New Zealand captain. He's one of those people who I have a lot of respect for. And I forgot his name on this call. So, But yeah, so well, that's all the time we have here. Unfortunately, I would love to have continued this discussion. Maybe we can get you back again and see where your journey has taken you and some new things insights you've had about your leadership and managing and growing teams. Any last thoughts, any parting thoughts to people out there who are looking to build startups? What they should be, maybe 2 or 3 things they should be thinking about.
No, I think I'd underline, when especially in the startup mode, I think over communication is fine. So err on the side of over communicating internally to whoever, whether it's the junior most person in your team or the senior most person in your team. Be always very clear why things are happening, where things are going. So I would say that's number one: over communicate, and do spend some time thinking through, what is it that the cultural connotations are of your day-to-day operations. So step back on and off and keep thinking about that. I think eventually in the long run, those two aspects definitely pay off. So Shri, thanks for having me. I think wonderful talking to you. Would love to have you on my podcast as well. Look forward to that.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Prithvi. It's been absolute pleasure. Again, this is Sri Chellappa with People Strategy Leaders podcast. Until next time.
Thank you.